Oh, hi. Yeah, it's true. To all those guys who watched last month's video, we're slowly but surely finishing up The Only Way to Play. If you missed that whole thing, oh boy, how awkward that you're finding out about this here. The Only Way to Play will officially have absolutely no more videos shown on YouTube at this point. Well, maybe one, but that's because it's very important for closure. With that said, I have a lot of Only Way to Play guides that have been begging to come out for ages now, so you know what, let's just release all of them. In these next couple of days, you guys are going to be bombarded with guides. Some are nice and respectable, like this Kunkka one that's coming up. It's pretty hefty, it's a multi-parter, because of course it is. And then some are Blink Dagger Anti-Mage, which is also nice and respectable. So sorry, let me just say that again. All videos coming up are nice and respectable, and I'm sure won't be controversial in any way, shape, or form. On an unrelated note, let's talk about the Divine 5-5 Divines Kunkka strat. You heard me right, son. Today we're talking about Kunkka, and we're going in for the double twist this episode. You thought the normal way to play Kunkka would be as like a crit carrying carry, so if I was to make a video on him, I'd probably go down the support route or something, but nope. The twist is that we're doing a guide on how to play Kunkka the way everyone's already playing him. The one thing that I strive to achieve with any and all of my videos is to give you guys a clearer understanding of why we do the things that we do. I'm sure 90% of people play heroes in the lanes that they do just because it'd be weird to do otherwise, right? Pros do it and they seem to know what they're doing, so if I copy them, I'll know what I'm doing. But pros or immortals or YouTube guide makers like me aren't any sort of elevated breed that can just command order and dictate how things should go. Every single pro started off as not a pro, and then became a pro. At what point in that journey do they become eligible to tell you how to play? Can they do so because they're a pro? Or are they a pro because they've learned how to do so? It's probably the latter. People play Kunkka as a carry, people play him as a support, some people pronounce it Kunkka, and who's to say if they're wrong or right? The one thing I want from you guys is to know that if you're playing these builds, you know why you're doing it. And even if you're not playing them, you know the exact reason that you're not. Question everything, man. I mean, even question me. There's nothing that separates me and you other than like an imaginary perceived barrier between teacher and student. Why don't you make some guides for your favorite heroes? You're allowed to. You are absolutely allowed to. And there's a big void currently, so fill it. Before you do that though, I want to talk about one of my favorite heroes. Kunkka, and the way that we're playing him tonight, is an honestly relaxing and simple premise. In this day and age, where every new hero introduces 32 new gimmicks and requires you to read a book on quantum physics to understand how best to play him, it's just a relief to have someone this easy. On that note, our triangle is going to look a lot different this day, because right at the top, the biggest foe that Kunkka counters is a stressful day. I don't know if I'm just getting older or more fatigued, but it's very, very nice to be able to pick up a hero that requires just a bit of mental power to play, and then just play him. It's why I don't really play Meepo as much anymore, or even Oracle. Imagine spinning plates all in a row, and the exact second that you let one of them fall, you lose. That's what it's like to play high-intensity heroes. It takes so much concentration and focus and stress and sweat just to achieve the same level of success as a guy in a coma playing Wraith King. And playing Kunkka is basically trying to keep one plate from smashing to the ground. Much easier, especially considering that that plate is snugly stored in the cupboard at all times. Speaking of Meepo, I kind of feel bad at how well Kunkka utterly destroys the poor guy. Every single spell that you have either deals AoE damage and AoE stun, or is an escape canceller. If you had a spell that reduces burst damage, then Meepo would you'd pretty much have nothing to do. It's lucky for Meepo that we don't have that. Oh. Right. And now I'm drenched in seawater. On the plus side, I found a leak in my suit that let a bunch of water in, so this is probably a good thing to happen before I go back out to space where I float around aimlessly in between videos. The hole is on my suit in that little bit under my right wrist on account of the constant friction of me being on a computer all day and all night, dragging a mouse. Don't pretend like you don't have that mark, you know what I'm talking about. Following Meepo, Carry Kunkka classically beats Broodmothers, PLs, CKs, and all illusion or unit-based heroes. I'll let you guess why. Following up with that, he also counters escapes on account of his X marks the spot, and following on with that, any and all DOT heroes, if you're using the Admiral's Rum. You probably don't know what I'm talking about when I say the Admiral's Rum. It'll make sense in a sec. On the flip side, Kunkka struggles against any and all BKB wielding heroes except... oh, no he doesn't. If you're just ignoring the spell part of his spells and focusing straight on that attack modifier that causes instant rampages. My favorite fact about Kunkka is that Dota Cinema many years ago put out a statement saying, please don't submit any more Kunkka Tidebringer rampages to top players. We have so many of them, and they take absolutely no skill to achieve. They're not impressive. And I just laugh when I think about that. I kind of agree and disagree. Yeah, they don't take any skill to achieve, but that is what's impressive about them. It's why we all play carry Kunkka like this. That rush of adrenaline after a one-hit team wipe's more addictive than crack. Allegedly. I wouldn't know. But I guess, moving on, he's maybe countered by high HP heroes who, I don't know, maybe regen a lot or something. I guess, like, but boo to that though, right? They're ruining all of our fun. Can you just die? Speaking of fun, let's talk about all the spells that we're going to have a lot of fun not using. Here is the typical build for Kunkka. Kunkka. And he's worked, not the best name. As you'll notice, we max out Tidebringer immediately and seemingly level up our other spells for some reason, but ignore all that. We can't just level up stats like we used to all those years ago. Torrent is something that was actually nerfed by the government, funnily enough. Kunkka's home at the Pirate Bay was taken away from us for a while there. Scary times. Torrent the spell is a giant 1500 cast range, 225 radius range, AoE disable. You already know that, you've taken a dozen to the face already. It has a cast animation of 0.4 seconds and an effect delay of 1.6 seconds, so it's exactly 2 seconds between clicking Q and selecting where you want it to land, and actually having it affect something. It deals from 75 damage to 300 damage depending on the level, but it always deals a 1.6 second stun, and a 35% move slow right afterwards, regardless of level. At level 1 though, the slow lasts for 1.5 seconds after the 1.6 seconds of the stun, and at level 4 it lasts for 4 seconds after. But my favourite part of this spell is the completely unnecessary and utterly pointless addition of characters actually flying into the air. Okay, brace yourself, we're going to get really technical. The Source engine is 100% a 3D game engine made for first-person shooters. It's weird, I know, Valve at one point made FPSs. I wonder whatever happened to that. When they ported Dota to Source 2, they ended up leaving all of those little bugbears in the new engine. If you were a hopeless optimist, you could actually look at Source 2 and go, wow, that is actually an engine that's also made for FPSs, and yet none have actually been made in Source 2. Yet. And then you can make yourself believe that Half-Life 3 is coming, but that would be a horribly depressing thing to do. I bring it up though because Dota 2 really doesn't need a Z or like vertical access outside of just being on high ground or low ground and getting vision or missing last hits and that sort of thing. That's not, I mean, it's not really necessary to have a Z index, right? And because it is a 3D game engine that is made around FPSs, it still has these really bizarre little Z-axis bugs that you get. Here's a little lesson in trickery that still hasn't been completely fixed. The way that Source works is that every hero, in fact every unit and model in general, has a part of their model called root transform. It's the part of the model that indicates its root, or usually its bottom. It's a pretty common thing in video games. When characters animate, they move all of their other bones and joints except for root transform, which stays completely still. It is the bone that every other bone is parented to. Every single bone moves relative to the root transform. I know, it's, bear with me here. That is until characters start moving to new places. A character teleporting has a stationary root transform bone while they're doing their little teleporty animation things, but the exact point where they actually teleport, the root transform moves. A character walking actually walks on the spot, but on the spot relative to the root transform, and the root transform is the thing that's constantly moving. I could demonstrate this in SFM. The game is coded in such a way that the character exists exactly where the root transform is. If that root transform bone of Kunkka is in the bounding box to Roshan's pit, for example, the game will say, Kunkka can attack Roshan. If that root transform bone is in the bounding box of the enemy fountain's shop or turret, he can buy items or die violently. First, but I want to show you how the Dota map looks in the Hammer editor. It looks kind of as you'd expect, right? Trees, there's towers, and giant orange translucent boxes that say trigger over and over and over again. We'll get to them in a sec. I assume most of you guys understand the construction of video games enough to sort of comprehend what's going on in the back end of all of this. These grey lines here indicate the dire path and radiant path that the dire and radiant creeps use when walking down lanes. These grey boxes indicate impassable terrain. There's all sorts of little things like that all dotted around, and obviously in-game they're completely invisible. They're just used in the map to signify specific paths and locations for events to occur. Each tower has a giant yellow circle around them that indicates their range. Honestly, I'd encourage you guys to delve into the Hammer editor yourself through the Dota 2 workshop tools and explore at your own pace. There are so many little, tiny little things that really affect your games without you even knowing about it. Sort of like gravity in the real world. You don't really think about it much, but it's constantly there, and you can abuse it. If you don't want to do that though, I'll do it for you. That's what the video is about. The most common of them are these orange trigger boxes. Nearly every single one of these does a different thing in-game, so we'll just go through them all individually in a sec. Before that though, I want to show you this part, on Dire's eastern map edge. You know why you're always struggling to place that anti-tinker ward up on that edge cliff even though it looks like what you're selecting is flat and waterable ground? Because in actuality, the map doesn't extend past that point. The map ends at that grey border. In actuality, you can't put any ward on by default. The only reason you're able to do it in-game is because Valve specifically added a bypass, a ward placement trigger spot on that little bit of jutty-outy unusable terrain. There is a small section of places in all 4 cardinal directions. The more you know, eh? You'll notice that around the ward spots and completely locked off cliff portions of the map, there are also giant trigger boxes. If you're imagining that they have something to do with observer ward placement, you're dead wrong. What these boxes are actually for is when Pudge or Vengeful Spirit swap someone up onto those cliffs. Having your root transform enter this trigger allows for the hero that the root transform belongs to receive unobstructed movement in order to combat against them dirty griefers. It's weird though, right? You'd assume as a non-game designer like me, I don't really know anything about game design, and I assume most of you guys don't either, but as a non-game designer, you'd assume that simply just adds like a sort of parameter to the hero themselves upon being hooked, to check if they're in any obstructed location after the hook finishes. It just constantly does that after every single hook, and then if it's ever successful, like gain unobstructed movement for 2 seconds, it close bracket or something like that, you know? But it's not how it works, because that'd be inefficient. That'd mean every single hero and every single unit would need that parameter added in, whereas just putting a box around the only locations where it could happen works a lot simpler. Works smarter, not harder, right? But that does mean that it is completely and utterly exploitable. Because if it works like how I just explained it, it'll only trigger if Valve knew to put a trigger box in that area. And that means it doesn't work in any place where they don't have that trigger. If Valve weren't thinking about it, you can abuse it. You know where it doesn't have that trigger? Literally all of the forest, dude! Hook someone into the trees, blink out, and then leave them without a quelling blade or a way to break out. Kill all of the couriers, stop them ever TPing out, give them an abandon, is what I'd say if I was a jerk, of course. What we should do with this power is nothing at all, of course. Be responsible, kids. You know where else it doesn't have these triggers? Those fancy little cliffside ward spots I just mentioned earlier. With all of this in mind, and the fact that Source 2 is a 3D engine, and the fact that all units have their own root transform, you can do very, very silly things.